How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Tezayin. Daf Kuf Tezayin, Daf 116 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends, here's the deal. Today we're starting the last parak of BavaMetzia. The last parak of BavaMetzia is really just like 3 daf, like not even. So we did Kuf Tezayin Amud Aleph yesterday because we got to the end of the parak. So we really just need to do Kuf Tezayin Amud Beis, and not even the whole thing. It's going to be a pretty short daf. It's going to be a pretty short daf today, I imagine. So, yeah, here we go. All right. Well, so we are on Daf Kuf Tezayin Amud Beis, the final parak of Mount Everest of BavaMetzia. Here we go. It says the Mishnah, Bayis v'aliyah. It feels like a shtickle. Almost feels like a shtickle, like Bechinas Erevin shtickle, but not really. But it feels like we're like starting to get our feet wet with kind of like Bava Basra vibes, like real estate and property. Habayis v'aliyah. The ground floor and the upper story. Okay, so Rashi says, like, for example, maybe you have 2 brothers who inherited a house, let's say, from their father, and so there's a ground floor and there is a second story. The whole thing implodes. Okay, so bayis aliyah shel shnayim shenaflu. So you have a house, so you have a bayis and an aliyah, a ground floor and an upper floor that is owned by 2 people respectively, and the whole structure implodes. Well, it's interesting. It's taka shayla. Does it implode or does it explode? Taka shayla. I have a shtickle hair sticking out over here. Here we go. Let's just make it worse. No, I don't want to make it worse. Wait 1 second. Let's make it better. Yeah, why make something worse when you can make it better? That's what I say. Habayis v'aliyah shel shnayim shenaflu shneim cholkin be'etzim v'avonim ve'ofer. Okay. So they divide everything up. They divide up the wood, the stones, the dirt. V'roin elu avonim wa'asuyis le'eshtaber. So now this is interesting, but we also look and we see which are the stones that made sense to have broken. What does that mean? So kind of like I was saying a second ago, implode versus explode. I don't know if it's necessarily imploding and exploding are the same words. Imploding might be right. I don't know if exploding would be the correct word. But anyways, Rashi kind of describes it. If it just kind of like imploded, so it would implode because the bottom floor would collapse, right? Meaning, I guess if the whole thing implodes, so it would be because the lower story collapsed and everything just kind of imploded. So therefore, if you see broken stones, the broken stones are from the lower story because that's the one that collapsed and caused the whole thing to implode. As opposed to, if let's say the walls just kind of like fell down, just like 90 degree, just like went, just like fell over 90 degrees, well then, which are the stones that are going to be broken? The ones that are furthest away, the ones that were at the top of the wall. If they just kind of like fall over 90 degrees and like the whole thing just like does like a snap, well then the stones with the greatest fall are the highest ones that are falling the furthest. So this feels like physics. Any physicists in the house? Babylon Talmud, do we have physicists? Probably. Being that I feel like this could have been a question like on my high school physics test, technically probably most of us have this level of physics, or at least knew it for a test many, many years ago. It's interesting, right? If you have what is like the force, because it's like you have like the force of gravity, like pulling it down, but then you also have like this like distance thing going on. Would that be like momentum? Is momentum a physics thing? Probably not. there's like force. Gravity is a force, probably, right? What's like movement in physics? Acceleration? Yeah, that sounds like a physics kind of thing. So you have, I guess, like gravity, then maybe you also have like some kind of acceleration. Like there would probably be a different thing physically, like if like a stone falls straight down versus if it like is at the top of a wall and the whole wall kind of falls on its side and it kind of goes the same distance down, but it's further away. Which one would be a greater impact? I guess that would be like the which has like the stronger force of gravity. All right. Physics. All right. Let's get with the program over here. All right. But the point being that there could be ways of knowing, right? So you see the broken stones. Well, if it implodes, you say, oh, there's the broken stones. It belongs to the, let's say, Reuven has the lower story and Shimon has the upper story. So why do I feel like I want to do the opposite? Shimon has the lower story, Reuven has the upper story. So if the stones are broken, so we say, well, if it imploded, then it's Shimon's from the lower story. If it kind of plopped over on its side, well, then the broken stones would be from the upper story, which would be Reuven's. So, okay. So again, V'roin elu avonim asuyis lishtaber, so we can see, well, which logically speaking would be the stones that would make sense to break, and then we can figure out who they belong to that way. And if somebody if one of them, Reuven or Shimon, one of the brothers, recognizes some of the stones, oh, that stone, I mean, that was a unique looking stone, that was definitely on my, that was a stone in my house. And it counts, and they count as part of the cheshbon. The question is, what is it, part of what cheshbon? We will get there today. All right, because we're going until the next Mishnah. So, we're going to get to everything related to this Mishnah today. Says the Gemara, Midikatoni roin michlal dikalemekom olayu. Okay, right. So as we've just spent a few minutes talking about if it implodes or if it kind of falls over. So midikatoni roin, from the fact that we say that we can kind of like sort of evaluate and try to say, well, if it imploded, then the broken stones would belong to Shimon on the bottom. If it kind of fell over, then the broken stones would belong to Reuven from the top story. So Mitztani Rowan, from the fact that we say we kind of evaluate it, so Michlal, it implies the Ikol Lemekom Olayu means that we could extrapolate. Ibechaboso Nofil, Ibechavoto Nofil. Did it implode or did it fall over? If that's the case, Reisha Amai Cholkin. Well, if that's the case, that we're talking about that it either imploded or fell over, well then how come in the Reisha we talk about Chol, right? We just said that they divided equally. Why? I mean, why are they just dividing it equally? They should be able to just make these cheshbonis. Say, well, the ones that are broken, you could evaluate it. So nechze ibichavot nofil el yisa isbor. If it fell over, so then the broken ones would be from the upper story. Ibichaboso nofil, but if it imploded, tasyoso isbor, then the broken stones would be from the lower story. Well, what if it fell at night? So we don't know how it fell. Well, why don't we look in the morning and see how it fell? Did it implode? Did it fall over? Dipaninu, well, they had already cleared it away. Cleared it off to the side or whatever. Well, why don't we go to the clearer awayers and ask them how they found it, how it fell? Did it implode or did it fall over? Well, it was just people from the public domain. I guess they needed to go somewhere. It was very inconvenient that there was a broken house there. So they cleared it away. And they went on with their lives. We don't know who they are. Okay. But then, why don't we say, well, if they were cleared away, let's see whose domain did they clear it into? I guess, was it Reuben's domain? Was it Shimon's domain? And then the other one would if he wants to claim any part of it, he would have to bring proof of what belongs to him, and it would be motzei mechaber olav haraya. Well, it could be that we're talking about a courtyard that is owned jointly by both of them. Inami b'rshus arabim. Alternatively, fakert, it's taken rishus arabim, where it belongs to neither of them. Alternatively, shutfin, right? If they are partners, well then b'chiyai gabna lo kapti adadi. Partners would not be makbid like this, right? If you have people who jointly own a space, then they wouldn't necessarily, right? They would allow each other to kind of use each other's space, so there would be permission to be there, and you wouldn't have to. If we're talking about partners, you wouldn't have to bring proof as to why your stuff, right? Meaning. The whole point of saying Amotz Mechaver Olav Haraya is that we're saying if it's in his reshus, then it belongs to him, and you would have to extract it from him. But if they're partners, then there's an understanding that both are allowed to use the chutzner. In which case, there's no chazaka that it belongs to, either one of them. All right. So we had said that if one of them recognizes, some of the stones, okay. So if one of them recognizes some of the stones. So then he could say, oh, I recognize that stone. It is mine. V'hala ma toyin. And what is the other one saying? So if Ruvain says, oh, I recognize that stone. It's from my house. What's Shimon saying? What's he responding? If Shimon agrees and says, oh yeah, of course, right. Yeah, that stone was yours. Well, pshita, obviously then Ruvain would be able to take it if Shimon agrees that it's Ruvain's. V'ilo omar in. And if Shimon does not agree, well then, and say, yes, it's yours. Lama notel. Well then, why would Ruvain be allowed to take it if Shimon doesn't agree that it's Ruvain's? Shimon says, I don't know. So let me have a tufta de Rav Nachman. It's a kashan Rav Nachman we saw the other day. Already about 3 weeks ago already. Wow, it doesn't feel like it was 3 weeks ago. The itmar mono li biyodcho. This is a sugi that we saw a few weeks ago. Shimon says to Ruvain, you owe me $100. Valo omer eini yodea. And Ruvain says, I don't know. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda Amri Chayev. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say, okay, so we trust Shimon, right? If Shimon says to Ruvain, you owe me $100, Ruvain says, I don't know. So it says Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda that Ruvain would have to pay Shimon. Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan Amei Potter. Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan say that Ruvain is Potter, that he would not have to pay Shimon. So according to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, when Shimon says you owe me $100 and Ruvain says I don't know, so we have Bari v'Shema, right? Shimon is sure that Ruvain owes him $100. Ruvain says I don't know, so we trust Shimon because Shimon is sure Ruvain doesn't know. So we trust Shimon, and it seems like this is the case over here as well, right? If so, let's say Shimon is the one who says, "I recognize this stone; it's from my house." And Reuben says, "I don't know," and we're saying that Shimon can have it. So it sounds like Bari v'Shema, Bari Od. If we go based on Shimon's certain claim, and not like and that overrides Reuven saying he doesn't know. But Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan had said that if Shimon says you owe me $100 and Reuven says I don't know, so then Reuven is potter. He doesn't have to pay Shimon. So if that's the case, in our case, when Shimon says this is my stone and Reuven says I don't know, why would Shimon be allowed to take it? So from the fact that we're saying that Shimon is allowed to take it sounds like it's a kasha on Rav Nachman. Well, it's because Rav Nachman can go and sheish asek shvua b'nein. You remember this? Well, you could say that Shimon can take it because there was an asek shvua, that when Shimon says that this is my stone and Reuven says I don't know, Shimon can have it because it's an asek shvua. Who remembers what an asek shvua is? Remember that? Shimon says to Reuven, you owe me $100. Reuven says, look, I definitely owe you $50. In terms of the other $50, I don't know. So in that case, he has to swear because it's mod b'miktsas. But at the same time, he can't swear because what's he going to swear about? I mean, he's admitting that he owes 50. In terms of the other 50, he's saying he doesn't know. So there's nothing he's not going to swear that he doesn't know. Therefore, he's just pashut he's chayav. Okay, so if Shimon says to Reuven, you owe me $100, Reuven says, I owe you 50, and the other 50 I don't know, so Reuven has to pay because he's chayav to swear about it midaraisa, because it's mod miktsas, but he can't swear because he's saying he doesn't know, so therefore, he just pays. And so therefore, if Nachman would say the same thing over here, when Shimon says, I recognize, let's say, not this stone, but these stones, okay, let's say he says, I recognize 10 stones, and Reuven says, look, 5 of them, yeah, I agree, they're yours. The other 5, I don't know, so we're going to say, so it's be'etzem mod b'miktsas, and he's saying he doesn't know about the other half, so Shimon, so there, he would have to swear, but he can't swear because he's saying he doesn't know, so therefore Shimon can have them. That's how Rav Nachman would explain it. But in a scenario of, I guess if Shimon would say, these are my 10 stones, and Reuben says, I don't know, so it seems like Shimon wouldn't necessarily get it. Okay? According to Rav Nachman. Ve'ol is lo min ha-cheshbin, and they count as part of the cheshbin. So what is this cheshbin? Sover Rava l'meima lefi cheshbin shivuris. Amakim d'amar en yodea reyot fei. Amar le'abai ad rabba. Ha reyot fei midahani yoda tfei lo yoda. Su leisle. Ve'idoch kulu de'a'echninu. El Amar Abai lefi cheshbin shleimis yochi ma'kamani le'lemalbun ravcha yinam le'tina dema'abda. Who could explain this? Givaldik. So if Shimon says, I recognize these 10 stones, so we say that okay, Shimon can have them, and we say that they count as part of the cheshbon. What's this counting as part of the cheshbon? So let's say there were 200 stones that fell. Okay, now 100 of them broke, 100 of them are still whole. So technically speaking, you divide everything in half, right? There's 200 stones, 100 broken, 100 whole. Reuven gets 50 broken, 50 whole. Shimon gets 50 broken, 50 whole. Fine. Now, Shimon identifies, let's say, 10 stones that are whole, and he recognizes them, that these are my stones. So the shaila is, okay, fine. So we're saying, okay, so he gets these 10 whole stones. Do those count as 10 of his 50 whole stones that he gets? Or are these separate from those 50? He gets 50 whole stones, and he recognizes these, he gets these as well, which means ultimately he's getting 60 whole stones, and Reuven's getting 40. So that's the shaila. Do these stones that he recognizes count from his cheshbon, or are they in addition to the cheshbon? So Sover Rava thought to say lefi cheshbon shvuris. So Rava thought to say that they count from the cheshbon shvuris, right? So meaning, Rava thought to say, look, Shimon is entitled, both Reuven and Shimon respectively are entitled to 50 whole ones and 50 broken ones. Now, Shimon identifies 10 whole ones that are his. So says Rava that they come to replace 10 of the broken ones that were coming to him. Right? So Shimon is entitled to 50 whole ones and 50 broken ones. Now he identifies 10 whole ones, let's say. So those are in place of 10 of the broken ones. So he still gets all 50 whole ones, plus these 10 that are that are swapped out instead of 10 broken ones. So he essentially gets 60 whole ones and 40 broken ones, and Reuven's going to get 60 broken ones and 40 whole ones. Alma came to Omer and Yodea, so we see that by Reuven saying, I don't know, Reyot Fei, he's in a worse off position. And now he's only getting 40 whole ones and he's getting 60 broken ones. Omar le Abaye ad Rabba. Abaye wants to argue, punkt verkehrt. Punkt verkehrt. Horeyot fei. Shimon is in the worse off position. Midahani yoda tfei lo yoda. Because Shimon is saying, I recognize these 10 stones. You know what he's saying? He's saying, look, I know that these 10 stones are mine. The others are not. He's saying, look, these are the ones that I know are mine. And you know what? I know that the rest of the whole stones aren't. Right? And he's, these are the only ones he's claiming because, he knows that these are his and they're whole. And he knows that the other ones aren't. So really, says Abaye, in theory, I would argue fakert. Midahani yoda, from the fact that he recognizes these 10, tfei lo yoda, and he doesn't recognize any of the others. Right, they're not his. Su leisle, so he doesn't get any more of the whole stones. Ve'idach kulu dehechnenu. And therefore, all of the rest of the whole stones go to Reuven. When Shimon says, I recognize these 10, he's saying, I know that these 10 are mine. I know that the rest of them are not. Which means that the rest of the 90 whole stones would go to Reuven. So meaning, Abaye is just responding to that sort of argument of Rava. That Rava had said that Reuven is in the worse off position because he said, I don't know, and therefore Shimon gets these 10 stones that he claims to recognize in addition to the 50 whole stones that he already gets, and Reuven is in the worse off position. Abaye argues the opposite. He says, actually, if you were talking about who's in the better position, who's in the worst position, says Abaye, I would argue that Shimon's in the worst position, because I would argue what he's saying is that he's saying, I recognize these, I know that these are mine, and actually, you know what else I know? The rest are not mine. And, based on if we were just trying to identify who's in the worst position, who's in the better position, says Abaye, I would argue that Shimon is in the worst position, and sort of viewing things in that way, he should only get those 10, and all of the rest of the whole stones should go to Reuven. Ela Omer Abaye, rather, says Abaye, look, Lefi cheshbon shleimus. Look, if Shimon recognizes 10 whole stones, so he gets those 10 whole stones, but they count as 10 of the 50 that are allotted to him, right? Reuven and Shimon respectively each get 50 whole ones and 50 broken ones. So assuming that 200 stones and 50 of them are broken, 50 of them are whole. So each gets 50 whole ones. And if Shimon recognizes, these 10, okay, so he can get those 10 as part of his 50. Okay, but then what's the point of pointing out these stones if, he's still getting the same amount whether he points out any stones or not? Well, well, maybe it's a very wide brick, or maybe it's made out of very good mud, very good materials or something. So they count as part of his cheshbon. He's not getting any more than he would have otherwise. But he's saying, look, I recognize this. This was a gewaldige stone. I recognize it. It's mine. I'm taking it. Right? So he's not getting necessarily more quantitatively, but in terms of qualitatively, he's pointing out that this is his and he's taking it. Whoa, I almost dropped something. All right, well, I told you, it wasn't such a big daf. That was Daf Kuf Tes Zayin of Masechet BavaMetzia. We really just did only really part of Daf Kuf Tes Zayin of Beis. We started the final parak of BavaMetzia, Abayis V'Aliyah, and we will pick up from the Mishnah to Maru Pisah.